والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيبنا وحبيب رب العالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. As we began yesterday, this book, the Al-Anwar, the Lights of Companionship, authored by Imam Abdul Wahhab al-Sha'rani, rahimahullah. Just one thing to note in his name, his full name, Abu Muhammad Abdul Wahhab bin Ahmad al-Sha'rani al-Shafi'i al-Shadhili. You see that throughout Islamic history, all of the scholars, when you go and you look in their books, always with their name, their mazhab will be attached. Through 1400 years of Islamic history, 1300 years, you'll see. He's at the end of his name, al-Shafi'i is affixed. Also al-Shadhili. Shadhili was the Tazkiyah, the Tasawwuf, the Sufi order that he was part of. Shadhili, that was also throughout Islamic history, that would be attached to people's names as well. So Shadhili is something more based in North Africa. So here after that, we began the book, and we come to the first section, because he said that there's 3 sections. Al-Fasl al-Awwal, part 1. في ذكر شيء من فضل الصحبة في الله تعالى. It is about reminding of some of the virtues of companionship for the sake of Allah. I'lam. So before starting the book, what he does is he lays out a few ground rules. He lays out a few principles. And now after the principles, he brings all of the ahadith that he could find regarding the virtues of companionship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He was a great muhaddis. As we talked about all the books that he read in the science of tafsir, hadith, everything. So he brings several ahadith regarding that as well. But prior to that, he lays out a few ground rules and a few principles. He says, "I'lam, know, waffaqani Allahu ta'ala wa iyyaka ila ma yuhibbu." May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enable you to that which is beloved to Him. So this is a way that our elders would do it. In Arabic it's done, and our elders, they do this as well. When they address a person, they give them dua as well. They don't just say, hey, remember this, remember this, remember this. He says, "I'lam, know this," and then he gives a dua to the person before going on. "Waffaqani Allahu ta'ala wa iyyak." May Allah give me and you the tawfiq. إِلَى مَا يُحِبُّ, to do that which He loves. أَنَّ الصُّحْبَةَ فِي اللَّهِ تَعَالَى مِنْ أَوْثَقِ عُرَى الْإِسْلَامِ. That good companionship for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is from the most firm and reliable bonds, عُرَى الْإِسْلَامِ, in Islam. If a person has good companionship, this is one of the firmest things that you will have in order to protect your deen. As Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalilihi." A person is on the religion of their friends. Look around in your life, and if you think about times in the past where maybe you were further from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a good question to ask ourselves is, who were our friends at that time? And if we find ourselves sitting today in the masjid, listening to a talk after salah, think about who are your friends at that time. Chances are that your friends from that time in your life that was not as good to this time are remarkably different. And so this is why the author says that good companionship for the sake of Allah is from one of the most firm and reliable bonds of Islam. وَمِنْ أَكْبَرِ أَبْوَابِ الْخَيْرِ, and it is one of the biggest doors to good. When you're friends with pious people, good people, they will lead you to doing good things as well. You'll see them doing good things, you'll be inspired. You'll learn things from them. You'll have opportunities to do good things that you would have not thought of when you were alone. وَقَدْ رَغَبَ الْعُلَمَاءُ فِيهَا سَلَفًا وَخَلَفًا. And the scholars have always encouraged people to seek out good companionship. The Salaf and the Khalaf. The scholars from the first generations and the scholars from the last generations. Meaning this is not anything new. This is something that has been consistent throughout Islam. We've been taught to have good companionship. In fact, the Sahaba radiyallahu an, why are they called? What are they called? We know our aqeedah is that the greatest people to walk the face of the earth after the Anbiya alayhimus salatu wasalam are the Sahaba radiyallahu an. Well, one time somebody asked Umar bin Abdul Aziz, no, they asked Abdullah bin Mubarak rahmatullahi alayhi, the great muhaddis. They asked him, who's better, Muawiyah radiallahu an or Umar bin Abdul Aziz? Of course, the person has an agenda in asking this question. Some people, they say bad things about Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu an. So he asked, who's better, Muawiyah radiallahu an or Umar bin Abdul Aziz? Umar bin Abdul Aziz, everybody regards him as the mujaddid of the first century, the reviver of Islam. Abdullah bin Mubarak responded, and he said, the dirt that would go into the nostrils of the horse of Muawiyah radiallahu an when he would ride alongside Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in battle is better than Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Not taking anything away from Umar bin Abdul Aziz rahmatullahi alayhi, but pointing out the importance of being a Sahabi. And what made the Sahaba, they chose out to be the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We could have called them anything. We could have called them awliya, ulama, sulaha, asdiqa, azkiya. All these words would apply to the Sahaba. But what did we say? We said Sahaba. Because this is the thing that defined them and their best characteristic, that they chose out good company. And the tabi'un, who were the tabi'un? Rasulullah ﷺ said this is the second greatest generation. Those who sought out the companionship of the Sahaba radiallahu an. The tabi'un, those who sought out the companionship of those who had the companionship of those who had the companionship of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this deen is about company. وَأَمَّا مَنْ حَذَّرَ مِنْهَا وقال إن العزلة أقرب للسلامة من الآفات وأبعد من تحمل الحقوق في المخالطات وأحزم للاشتغال بالطاعات فإنما ذلك في حق المريد ما دام قاصرا. There are some people, however, they say, and there's people like this that you may know, and there's people in general, they say that you shouldn't mix with people, right? So he wants to speak about this as well. So he's like, well, I've just made this big statement that the most strong way of keeping your deen is having good bonds. But there are ulama and there are scholars who say it's better to stay alone and not to mix with people. And many times when a person tries to get closer to Allah, the scholars will say do a few things. One is eat less, sleep less, talk less, spend less time with people. So how do you reconcile this? So he says, as far as those who have caution against mixing with people, and they said that إِنَّ الْعُزْلَةَ أَقْرَبُ لِلسَّلَامَةِ مِنَ الْآفَاتِ, that solitude and being withdrawn from people is more likely to keep you safe from calamities. وَأَبْعَدُ مِن تَحَمُّلِ الْحُقُوقِ فِي الْمُخَالَطَاتِ, and will lessen the burden of the burdens that come upon you when you mix. When you mix with people and you have a big social circle, you have to call, you have to make sure that people are okay. If they invite you somewhere, you have to go. If they get sick, you have to call them, you have to visit them, you have to get gifts for their kids. There's some obligations that go along with that, right? وَأَحْزَمُ لِلْإِشْتِغَالِ بِالطَّاعَاتِ, and it will foster a greater determination when you're away from people to busy oneself with ibadah. Otherwise, like we see happens in i'tikaf sometimes. I'tikaf is supposed to be a time when people do ibadah. But when you make your friends in i'tikaf, people just sit and talk and they don't do their ibadah. Talking is beneficial too if you're talking about good things, right? فَإِنَّمَا ذَلِكَ فِي حَقِّ الْمُرِيدِ. He clarifies and he says, that is in regards to the seeker, مَا دَامَ قَاصِرًا, when he's still developing, when he's a bit deficient. فَإِذَا انْتَهَا سُلُوكُهُ, when his traversal, when his travel, his journey to Allah has come to an end, meaning he's no longer, deen has become part and parcel of his life. There's not takalluf in there anymore. وَكَمُلَ حَالُهُ, and his condition has become complete. بِأَنْ صَارَ يَشْهَدُ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْخَلْقِهِ, and how do you know that your condition has become complete? That you begin to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's actions in His creation. You see things happening around you and you realize, you witness Allah in His creation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is causing this to happen and this to happen. كَانَ الْأَفْضَلُ فِي حَقِّهِ الْخُلْطَةِ, then when that person reaches that stage, it's better for him to mix with people. بَلِ الْخُلْطَةُ فِي حَقِّ مِثْلِ هَذَا وَاجِبَةٌ, rather, mixing with people for a person who's reached this state, that they see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's workings in His creation, it's wajib on them to mix with people. Why? Because companionship is a two-way street. Yes, you benefit from others, but sometimes Allah puts you in the situation where maybe the people around you are not benefiting you, but you have to benefit them. Like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was he benefiting? He was benefiting the people around him, despite the hardships that he had to go through. Imam Bukhari rahmatullahi alayhi, he had students, and subhanallah, sometimes when you stick around trying to benefit a person, they end up benefiting you when you didn't expect it. So Imam Bukhari said about Imam Tirmizi rahmatullahi alayhi. And Imam Tirmizi loved Imam Bukhari. They say when Imam Bukhari passed away, Imam Tirmizi cried so much, he went blind. That's what some people say. Others, maybe it's old age. Maybe it was a factor of both. Grief also takes a big toll on your health, right? So Imam Bukhari, he said that I have benefited more from Abu Isa, from Imam Tirmizi, than he's benefited from me. He thinks he's taken all the benefit, but I've benefited from him more than he's benefited from me. But so a person like that is wajib. كما قال بعضهم, as some of the scholars have said. لكن العارف في أواخر عمره يحن إلى الوحدة. However, even though for some people it's wajib to mix, one who recognizes Allah towards the end of his life, a natural inclination comes in them to be alone. Kal bidaya, like it came at the beginning. A person begins to change their life and then they want to be alone because they have to develop themselves spiritually. Then the more part of their life, vast majority of their life, they have to mix with people. But then towards the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He takes a person back to the beginning in everything. You're cranky when you're a child and you cry when you're a child, you cry more when you're elderly. You're weak when you're a child, you become weak when you're old. You're dependent on others when you're old. When you're young, you're dependent on others when you're old. Similarly, you wanted to be alone when you were younger spiritually. When you're reaching the end of that journey, you'll want to be alone again. فَلَا يَصِيرُ لَهُ وَقْتٌ يَسَعُ النَّاسِ. So then at that time, he will not have enough time to accommodate the people. Now who set this example? كما وقع لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, as happened with Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم حين أنزلت عليه سورة النصر, when Surah Al-Nasr إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح was revealed. So what happened? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was busy with all of the people, but then towards the end of his life, إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ was revealed. When Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu heard this surah, he began to cry. Later on, after Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away, after Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu passed away, Umar radiallahu anhu, he used to have his majalis, and he used to call the shuhada, not the shuhada, the veterans of the Battle of Badr. They would come and they would sit with him. But along with that, he would call Abdullah bin Abbas. So they would get annoyed. They say, like, we were with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the beginning. He was 13 or 14 when Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Why is this boy sitting with us? At that time, Umar radiallahu anhu said, you know which family he's from. Come on. But Umar radiallahu anhu, the reason he kept Abdullah bin Abbas with him was because of his intelligence. So what he did was, one day, he sat all of them down and he said, I want to ask you guys, what is the tafsir of إِذَا جَاءَ نَصْرُ اللَّهِ وَالْفَتْحِ, the surah? That when the victory and the help and assistance from Allah comes, that victory of Allah comes, وَرَأَيْتَ النَّاسَ يَدْخُلُونَ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ أَفْوَاجًا, and you see people entering Islam in droves, فَسَبِّحْ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّكَ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ, then declare the purity of your Lord with His praise, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ, and seek His forgiveness, إِنَّهُ كَانَ تَوَّابًا, verily He is the most forgiving, or most turning to you. So now some Sahaba said that when Allah's victory comes, you need to be grateful, and they gave different explanations. So then Umar radiallahu anh, he came to Abdullah bin Abbas because he wanted to demonstrate a point. He came to Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anh, and he said, what do you think? What is the tafsir of this? He said that, I think that the tafsir of this is that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's life on this world, in this world, is coming to an end. Umar radiallahu anh said, that's exactly what it is. So now they realized how knowledgeable Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anh was, but how did it signify that the end of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam's life was drawing near? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was telling Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, your mission with the people has been accomplished. Now who has to carry out this mission now? This mission now has to be carried out by the Sahaba radiallahu an. They're the ones who went and traveled the entire world. So who is it? So now what is your job, Ya Rasulullah? Your job now is to turn in abundant tasbih to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and istighfar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Sahaba radiallahu an, they said Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did this, like Aisha radiallahu anh, she said, I saw Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam after Iza Ja'a was revealed, he would do more tasbih, more istighfar, more zikr of Allah than he would do before. He would already do more than everyone, but at the end of his life, he would do more. In fact, it's narrated by Imam Ahmad, Imam Abu Dawud, Imam Tirmizi, Imam Nasai, and Ibn Majah. And you can you could just remember this if you want. That in Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I'm guessing this towards the end of his life, that he used to read this tasbih 100 times in his salah. This tasbih is Allahumma ghfirli. Say with me, Allahumma ghfirli wa tub alayya innaka antat tawwabul ghafur. So see, all of the words are going along with Surah Idha Ja'a. Allahumma ghfirli wa tub alayya innaka antat tawwabul ghafur. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would read this 100 times in Salah. Many different ways to do this. You could do this at the end after you read Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi. Or you could do it 10 times in ruku, 10 times when you stand up in qawma, sami Allahu liman hamida, 10 times in sajda, 10 times sitting between sajdas, 10 times in the second sajda. You'll get 100 in that way, 50 in each rakat. So like, because these tasbihs that we read in ruku, sajda, we learn them, and the namaz is supposed to be kept short when read in jamaat. When you're reading nawafil, you can read other du'as in ruku, in sajda, in qawma, after at-tahiyyat. You can read different du'as. So this is one thing to do. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he did this, and that's why some people towards the end of their life, they incline towards this. Lastly, he says on this page, and we'll stop here, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا يُقَالْ. So know that it should not be said, الْعُزْلَةُ أَفْضَلُ مُطْلَقًا. That staying away from people is categorically better than mixing with people. وَلَا الْخُلْطَةُ أَفْضَلُ مُطْلَقًا. Nor is mixing with people categorically better than staying away from people. Rather, you have to look at each situation of a person. Inshallah, we'll continue with this tomorrow. Probably tomorrow or the day after is when we'll start the different ahadith that he brings. Jazakumullah. If anybody wants the dua again, Allahumma ghfirli wa tub alayya innaka antat tawwabul ghafur. It's narrated again by Imam Ahmad, Imam Abu Dawud, Imam Tirmizi, Imam Nasai, and Ibn Majah.